Okay, Watchman of Ephraim here. This is part 2 of Messiah, Jesus Christ, the Sabbath rest for the whole world. This has to deal with 2Corinthians 3, understanding 2Corinthians 3. A misunderstood chapter by both Orthodox pagan Christianity and the Hebrew Roots movement. They're both wrong on this chapter. Here's the Ten Commandments. This was a shadow of the good things to come. It's the shadow of this spirit, this now spirit being here. That's Melchizedek, of course. That's the Spirit of Christ who comes and cleanses you, your inner man, once again, from the first video. What does the tabernacle, the temple of Solomon, what does it represent? The human body, spirit, soul, and body. The outer court, the body, the holy place, the soul, and the most holy place, the mind, the mind, the cardia, the spirit, the mind, where the Spirit of God comes and resides. Spirit of God here, Shekinah glory, and the Spirit of Christ, which notice once again the ark, Ten Commandments inside the ark. He comes in, he sprinkles you clean, your evil conscience. He begins to cleanse you as you submit. He's your Lord. This is why you have the two cherubims. He sits as Lord and God together. So let me go ahead and get into 2 Corinthians 2 here to hopefully help you understand better what Paul is meaning here. He is not doing away with the law. He's focusing here on the fulfillments of the law. Yes, the letter of the law, the gramma, as it is written, for especially this age, the priesthood has been abolished. You don't have to look at 2 tablets of stone to be righteous. You don't have to keep the Sabbath in the letter anymore. Paul wasn't saying you can proclaim Sunday to be the Sabbath day. No, Saturday or the 7th day will always be the Sabbath day. You're just not under it in the letter. Your Sabbath rest began on the Day of Atonement, a solemn rest, when you were baptized, when you believed and confessed, and the Spirit of God and the Spirit of Christ came and began to dwell with you. I can review it one more time. Let's go to Romans before we get into Romans chapter 8, verse 9 here. Notice this statement here. But you are not in the flesh, but in the Spirit, if indeed the Spirit of God dwells in you. Now, if anyone does not have the Spirit of Christ, notice, Spirit of God and Spirit of Christ. He is not his. And if Christ is in you, okay, the body is dead because of sin, but the Spirit is life because of righteousness. Actually, the body of sin is done away. You were raised according to the operation of God through faith on the 8th day of Pentecost, on the morrow after the Sabbath. Okay. I guess a quick review. Once again, this is a shadow. This is the fulfillment of that shadow. anything that can be fulfilled is a shadow. Let's call it like it is. We are not abolishing the law, per se. We are establishing the law, the spiritual fulfillments. There's a shadow, there is a fulfillment. For the law having a shadow of the good things to come. And also 2 Corinthians 16:17, the holy days, the Sabbaths, were shadows of things to come. They are shadows. And you, as a first fruit priest, are not obligated to keep those in the shadow, in the letter, these basic principles to be righteous. You can do it if you want, but you're not righteous for it, because righteousness does not come by the law. Get a sip of water here. Paul was not saying to go out and begin to keep pagan holidays. This could be a Synagogue of Satan video, too. It can go either way. Which didn't exist. Orthodox pagan Christian holidays didn't exist. Where do I have it here? Okay. Once again, spiritual fulfillment. Here's the letter, the slaying of a lamb, the gramma, as is written, or on a physical plane, lamb slain, blood applied to the doorposts and lintels of the house, coming out of physical Egypt, the man slain, the Lamb of God, the man, the blood applied to you when you come out of spiritual Egypt, when you come out of your world of sin. And you rest, and you allow this being to begin to live his life in you. Okay? Okay. 2 Corinthians 3. Do we begin again to commend ourselves? Here's Paul defending his apostleship. Do we begin again to commend ourselves, or do we need, as some others, epistles of commendation to you, or letters of commendation from you? You are epistles written on our hearts, known and read by all men. Paul founded the Corinthian ecclesia, church. Clearly, you are an epistle of Christ, ministered by us. Okay, so here he begins to get into the shadow. Written not with ink, the writing here on here represents the ink, although we know that the finger of God wrote the commandments. Okay. So here's the shadow. Here is the ink, the written words. We go back here. But by the Spirit of the living God. That's the fulfillment. Here's the Shekinah glory once again. In the most holy of all, the human mind. Okay. Not on tablets of stone. There's the letter, or the shadow, but on tablets of flesh, that is, the heart. If you saw the first video, the cardia doesn't really mean your beating heart. It's your mind, it's your spirit. The inner person. Once again, let's pull up the model of the tabernacle or the temple, most holy place. The letter right? The tablets of stone where the words were written. Here's the fulfillment here. Here over here is to the right, the most holy place. It's the human mind. That's what the ark is all about. You see, it's the human mind. The spirit is where the ark is, and where the two tablets of stone, the old covenant, is. Okay, here's of course, the human body in the middle, the fulfillment. Okay, here's where you know who. Okay, so here's the ark. Once again, he's cleansing the most holy place, which is the human mind. And then he begins to live his life through you. What is the fulfillment of the Ten Commandments? Once again, anything that can be fulfilled is a shadow. It's the love of God. So we have not on tablets of stone, but on tablets of flesh. Okay? He's not speaking of the literal heart right here. He's talking about right here. You see the comparison, the tablets of stone, okay, and versus the tablets of flesh. Tablet of stone, tablet of flesh, okay? So he's establishing the law. He's not doing away with it. He's establishing it. It's end purpose. It's telos, okay? And he's not saying you can run out now and begin to keep pagan holidays. As priests, those holy days, Old Testament festivals, shadows are there for your learning. You're going to teach them to the babies, to the infants in the coming kingdom. Those you're going to rule over. Okay? Okay, that is the heart, the cardia. And we have such trust through Christ toward God. So it's all about him. It's all through him. Not that we are sufficient of ourselves to think of anything as being from ourselves, but our sufficiency is from God. Notice, who also made us sufficient as ministers of the new covenant. Notice here, not of the letter or the grammaton, how it's written. Yeah. Thou shalt not, thou shalt not, thou shalt not, thou shalt not, right? Which implies that you're a sinner. But of the Spirit. Now, this is interesting because there's a little footnote here. A lowercase spirit. In other words, he's not implying here the Spirit of God, but the spirit of the law, the intention of the law, the end of the law. I've read a few commentaries on this also. Okay, so here's the letter. Here's the spirit. What it was intended for, what it pointed to. Okay? It's all about him. Okay? Notice, for the letter kills, but the Spirit gives life. Once again, no Holy Spirit given with the old covenant. So what did the law do that was given as external rules and regulations? What did it do? What did Paul say? Killed me. It exposed the Israelites as the filthy sinners they were. Okay? Ministry of death, written and engraved on stones. It was a shadow of something better to come. The love of God and the love of Christ. So we're not abolishing. We're the letter is abolished for us. The priesthood, it's going to be different though in the next age for those we rule over. The new covenant, the fulfillment, is this. It will come to pass in the last days that I will pour my Spirit out upon all flesh. Right? If anybody keeps my word, my Father will love him and I will love him, and we will come and make our home with him. Okay? But if the ministry of death, written and engraved on stones, that's pretty plain. Like an X-ray machine. X-rays you and you've found you have stage 4 cancer or stage 4 sin. The doctor turns and says to you, you're done. You're toast. That's what it did. And it's not the law's fault. The law is holy, the commandment holy, just, and good. As I mentioned in the last video I did on the synagogue of Satan. Finding fault with them, right? He says a new covenant I'm going to give them, the house of Israel and the house of Judah. Okay, it's going to involve you know who, your Sabbath rest. He's going to come and do the work for you. You have to submit, though. You have to put that yoke on you. Like he said, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble of heart. And I will give rest, a cessation of work for your souls. Okay? All right, so we're fulfilling the law. We're establishing the law. That's what the master of Torah, Paul, is all about. See, Orthodox takes this and they say, oh, well, the law's abolished. We can go out and keep pagan holidays. We can keep Christmas. We can deck the halls. We can get our Easter baskets and hide them for our kids. No, he didn't say that. He's just showing you how the law is fulfilled, how it's established. He's showing you the telos, the end of the Torah. Okay, the ministry of death written and engraved on stones was glorious, so that the children of Israel could not look steadily at the face of Moses because of the glory of his countenance. Talking about Exodus 34. He would go into that tent outside the camp. He would get the instructions from God. He would come out and he would talk to them. And they couldn't look steadily at his face because he had a glory, because he was in there with God. His face shone. They had to turn, they had to look. They had to, they couldn't look directly at him. Look steadily at the face of Moses because of the glory of his countenance, which glory was passing away. If you look at other versions and you look at the Greek, this implies abolished. How will the ministry of the Spirit not be more glorious? Shadow, fulfillment. Less glory, more glory. It's all about him. For if, verse 9, the ministry of condemnation had glory, ministry of condemnation, you're riddled with sin. The penalty of sin is death. The commandment came, sin revived, and I died. Okay. So if this ministry of condemnation had glory, the ministry of righteousness exceeds much more in glory. You believe and confess, you're baptized, you receive the Spirit, and He begins to work, live His life in you. That's the only, this is what He will accept. He won't accept your own efforts. That's why Paul was so adamant against the works of the law, these shadow, like getting circumcised. You were circumcised on the day of Pentecost. The body of the sins of the flesh, the body of sins done away. The body of sin done away, raised with him into the heavenlies. That's the day of Pentecost. Once again, the law was established. The end, the fulfillment was established. We did not do away with the law. We established it. The spiritual applications. This got abolished. The fulfillment got established. And again, we don't go running out and because if we go again, just another example. Let me skip right over to 2 Corinthians chapter 5 real quick. Verse 1, for we know that if our earthly house, this tent, this physical body, this tent, this tabernacle, this house, this tabernacle, as it's translated, Paul's talking about the Feast of Tabernacles, is destroyed. We have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. So he's pointing you back to the Feast of Tabernacles and your temporary dwelling, as they did in the wilderness. So you're living this feast day now. And there's a prophetic part of it too, where you will be dwelling in your permanent house along with God. That is fully realized in Revelation chapter 22. Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell among them. That's why he had them go to the city of Jerusalem, where he put his name, and they had to dwell in booths in Jerusalem after they came out of this roaming in the wilderness in these temporary sukkahs. You don't have to wait every year to build a sukkah in your backyard. The fulfillment is right here. Okay? We have established the law. We haven't done away with it. Okay, let's go back. Okay, so the ministry of righteousness exceeds much more in glory. Well, who is our righteousness? Who is our wisdom? Who's our sanctification? 1 Corinthians 1:30. It's all him. Okay, therefore, since we have, verse 11. For if what is passing away or abolished was glorious, what remains is much more glorious. abolished, what did Paul tell you to do? Cast out the bondwoman and her son. This is the covenant of works. This is Hagar, he said. You got to, those that they shall live by them. This is the works of the law, the shadow. He does the works. Okay. He circumcises you with the circumcision made without hands. Okay. For even what was made glorious had no glory in this respect, because of the glory that excels. Yeah, this excels. This had glory, but much more glory. Who had more glory than Moses? In Hebrews 3, I forget which verse, I'm sorry. Okay, we're not abolishing the law. No, not at all, not at all. Okay. Therefore, since we have such hope, we use great boldness of speech, unlike Moses, who put a veil over his face so that the children of Israel could not look steadily at the end of what was passing away. I will do a video on this concerning the synagogue of Satan and how, you'll just see, I'll point it right out to you, how the Hebrew Roots movement twists this. And what they will try to tell you, well, let me just save it for that video. This veil thing. Okay, so what he would do after you could read, I'm not going to go into it. The video on the synagogue of Satan, the Hebrew Roots, Messianics, and that, I'll explain it then. I'll go to chapter 34, and talk about it. But anyways, when it was done speaking to the people, you can read it again in Exodus 34, he would put a veil on his face until he went back into this tent outside the camp. Because of the golden calf incident, everything got switched. The people became defiled, so God went outside the camp. Moses had to go outside the camp to him. But this whole time that the veil was on his face, his glory would fade away. But they couldn't see it. Unlike Moses, who put a veil over his face so that the children of Israel could not look steadily at the end of what was passing away. Because the veil was on his face, they couldn't see that it was... When he would come out with talking with God, it would be, in its strongest glory, because he was in the presence of God. The Shekinah glory or whatever. And once he stepped out, it would slowly start to fade away. He would talk a short time, he would put the veil on his face, and then most of the time the veil was on his face until he went back in sometime later, how many days later, whatever, who knows. And that whole time it would just fade away. This is what Paul is talking about. Okay. So the children of Israel could not look steadily at the end of what was passing away or being abolished, but their minds were blinded. For until this day the same veil remains unlifted in the reading of the Old Covenant. This should translate. Because the veil is taken away in Messiah, okay? Their minds were blinded. They can't see that the 10 Commandments were the Spirit of Christ and the Spirit of God. But if they turned and if they understood who their Messiah was and like what the fulfillment of Pentecost was, or even this here, this is what Paul's talking about, okay? All they understood was a lamb slaughtered because they came out of Egypt. They were delivered out of Egypt. They didn't understand what it pointed to here. This is what Paul's talking about. But when one turns to the Lord, the veil is taken away. Oh, I get it. I see the fulfillment. This is what he's talking about here. Same thing. Their minds are blinded. They don't know that this pointed to this old covenant, the core. Exodus, real quick, 34:28, among other verses. And Moses was there on the mountain. He neither ate, for 40 days, he neither ate bread and drank water. And he had in his hands the 2 tablets of stone, the 10 commandments. Well, he had in his hand the tablets of the covenant, the 10 commandments. You can see that confirmed in Hebrews 9:4, I believe. And behind the veil, the most holy of all, in which was the ark, and inside the ark, the tablets of the covenant. They can't see what this points to. Again, an example. Here, again, I mean, the reading of the old covenant, you got to slaughter a lamb. You got to go to the place where God chooses. You got to slaughter a lamb and you got to tell your children, we were slaves in Egypt, and God delivered us from the land of Egypt. Therefore, we are commanded to sacrifice a lamb every year. Get it? They didn't see who their Messiah was, and they crucified him on that very day. But when they turned to him, we killed him on the Passover. We slaughtered him outside the camp on top of it. He was the leper. He suffered the death of intentional sin outside the camp. When we turn to the Lord, he's the fulfillment of all this stuff. That's why Paul told him in Corinthians, stick to the head. Don't get involved with all these philosophies of men, and don't get caught up in physical circumcision. And don't let anybody judge you in meat or in drink or in eating and drinking or in regard to a festival, a holy day, the new moons, the Sabbaths, which are shadows of things to come. But the reality or the substance, is a good translation, is who. Here. Get it? We're establishing the Torah, the law, which is a shadow of the good things to come. Now Christ came as high priest concerning the good things to come. I do believe that's in Hebrews 9. It could be off. Terrible with memory. I could look it up. Good things to come. This was to come. Okay? But even to this day, when Moses is read, a veil lies on their heart. They're only understanding the letter. They're blinded to what this pointed to. That when they turn to him, I get it. The veil is taken away. And that veil, by the way, over the heart is the cardia, the mind, is right here. That veil. Not only represents his flesh, but it represents something else. The foreskin over the heart, that when you turn to right here, between the most holy place and the holy place, the veil is taken away. You have an eye to see, eyes to see. Okay? So we are establishing the law. You see Romans 3:31, how it works. Get a sip of water here. Okay. Okay, where am I? Okay. For until this day, the same veil remains unlifted in the reading of the old covenant, because the veil is taken away in Christ once again. For Christ our Passover is sacrificed for us. Christ our Passover. Therefore, let us keep the feast. He's not talking about the literal feast of unleavened bread. He's talking about keeping the feast of unleavened bread with sincerity and truth. That's this man right here. But even to this day, when Moses read, a veil lies on their heart. Nevertheless, when one turns to the Lord, the veil is taken away. You begin to understand the spiritual fulfillments of the law. We are establishing the law. We aren't doing away with the law. We are establishing what these shadow commands pointed to. We don't run out and begin to keep whatever we want. Now here's verse 17, extremely important. Now the Lord is the Spirit. In the beginning we talked about the Spirit of God, the beginning of the chapter. Not with ink, but by the Spirit of the living God. Now here's the Spirit of Christ. Now the Lord is that Spirit. And where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. From what? The letter of the law, the letter. Thou shalt not, thou shalt not, thou shalt not. It's just a shadow. Okay. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. On that day, the Day of Atonement is fulfilled when you're baptized and you believe. It begins a Sabbath of solemn rest because He comes and begins to do all the work. Cleanses you. Begins to live His life in you. It's no longer I who live, Galatians 2:20, but Christ lives in me. We are establishing the law. But we all, with unveiled face, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory, just as by the Spirit of the Lord. Now I could go to Leviticus 14. This is probably where he was pointing to. If you've watched my videos, read Leviticus 14. I'm trying to keep this short. Where the leper is, he's getting closer to the he's coming into the camp. He's allowed to come in. He's clean. He's being cleansed. He's shaving his eyes. He's shaving his hair off his body, off his face, off his head. He's washing. He's changing his garment. All these rituals he's going through. The two birds, having oil sprinkled on him. He's changing his features. God commands that he shaves his eyebrows, and he's becoming a new creation. He's as he's getting closer. There's the seventh day. Then there's the eighth day where he's completely changed. He's shaved everything off, and his garments are changed. He's a new creation. His glory is changing as he's getting closer to the door of the tabernacle of meeting. That's where he pulled this from. Everything is concise. The old covenant concealed, the new covenant revealed. Okay? Get it? It's all about him. Once again, to finish it up, Romans 13. owe no one anything except to love one another. For he who loves another has fulfilled the law. For the commandments, okay, so we know what we're talking about here. For the commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, you shall not covet. And if there is any other commandment, are all summed up in this saying, namely, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no harm to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. Anything that can be fulfilled is a shadow. It's a shadow. Because it can be fulfilled. It's a shadow, the Lamb. It was fulfilled. Do you see how Matthew 5:17-20 works out? Anybody who relaxes the least of these commandments will be least in the kingdom. It all goes through him. Well, the first commandment, by the way, the big one, which never gets mentioned, is circumcision. You got that on the 8th day of Pentecost. Yeah. One more here. Let's just Romans 5. And how do we love? What love will be accepted? Once again, put it together. It's a jigsaw puzzle. Now, hope does not disappoint because the love of God has been poured out in our hearts by the Holy Spirit who was given to us, and the Spirit of Christ. It's no longer I who live, but who? Christ who lives in me. Once again, understand we have not abolished the law. The letter, the grammar, gives way to the Spirit. Not the letter, but the Spirit. Not the shadow, but the reality. Okay? And we don't run out and begin to add or take away from the Word. Okay? Shadow, reality. Letter, grammar, as written, Spirit, the intention, the end of the commandment. Okay? Hey, only 43 minutes. So there you go. Part 2. Messiah Jesus, our Sabbath rest, the world's Sabbath rest, because each in their own order, everyone is going to have this opportunity. It's coming to everyone because of the Day of Atonement, because of the Passover. Okay? So, thank you for your time and thank you for listening.